So, good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many faces and be here today. It's relatively good weather. And talk about change finance and finance change. It's going to be an exciting evening, and I see everyone knows somebody and many people in the room. So we'll have enough time for networking afterwards. My name is Herbert. I'm an executive at the BMW Foundation, responsible for Respond, Tech and Innovation for Good, investments, and the Sustainable Finance branch. And I'm here for Frank Niederländer, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, and you might, many of you know him already, so all the best from him, and he's not going to be here with us today. Today is a very special occasion. It is the first Salon by Club of Rome, the German chapter, together with the BMW Foundation and the Arts and Nature Social Club. So it's exciting because it's the first one that we're doing together. And also it's the first Stammtisch since 2 years now. We weren't able to meet, and obviously I'm with the foundation for 3 years or 2.5, so I haven't been in a Stammtisch myself, so I'm very excited. I think you know more about it than I do. The topic is very interesting and important, how to enable the shift towards a green transition, what the role finance could play, and what we need to see as a change in our financial and economic systems. So you'll find in this room the impact investing community in Munich. I'm not sure how many are from outside Munich. Who is us? So Germany, Europe, Netherlands, I heard. So who's from where? So the core is Munich, and many from outside too, and this is very nice because it's a tradition, and the foundation started this many years ago, and it's very interesting to restart and refresh. We are today, in this year, the Club of Rome is celebrating 50 years of the Limits of Growth report. And this is the first of 2 salons we're going to have together. And it's amazing to see how much was acknowledged and seen already in 1972, and this is 50 years ago, how much change and limits to growth were defined, and a lot of it still existing, limits, and a lot happened positively in the past years too, so in balance, it's step by step and going forward. The BMW Foundation is also 50 years old since last year. It's been always concerned about societal challenges and transformation. And we meet now because impact investing is, for the past decade, in the core of and the heart of the Foundation's work and activities. And we're meeting Club of Rome in this to intensify the conversations. And this is one of 2 salons together. And this is going to be very exciting. I'm not going to speak longer. Thank you for the team of all the 3 institutions, BMW Foundation, Club of Rome, and the Arts and Nature Social Club. And Jörg, Geier, yeah, you're here, is going to go get you through the day. And thank you for the speakers who are here today, and looking forward to the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jörg Geier. Thank you, Herbert, and thank you, BMW Foundation, for supporting us in this event tonight. I'm wearing several hats tonight. I'm on the board of the Arts and Nature Social Club, a fairly young organization, a couple of years old, and the mission really is to bring together the arts and the sciences, because the assumption is that some people have to be touched emotionally in order to make a difference, and just talking to people's heads won't make the difference. The Club of Rome, most of you will probably know. I'm a member there as well. There is the International Club of Rome, and Mariana, Bozesan, as well as Peter Blom are members of the International Club of Rome. Daniel Dahm is a member of the German chapter of the Club of Rome, and as Herbert pointed out, has been concerned about the future of humanity for many years. Limits to Growth is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and the Club of Rome is really has been or was the first organization really thinking about challenges that the world is facing from a systems level, looking at leverage points and ways one needs to address a system in order to result in long-lasting shifts, hopefully for the better. And I would like to introduce the three speakers tonight, and thank you for coming all the way, especially to Peter and to Daniel. Peter is the former CEO of Triodos Bank, and he's currently on the board of the Dutch Central Bank, the Supervisory Board, and has many other hats, and I'm sure he will share a bit more about his personal concerns. Mariana Bozesan is an integral investor, and she will share with us, I'm sure, some more insights what makes her different to, let's call it, a regular impact investor. And she is also a serial entrepreneur coming from a technology background and having lived in the Silicon Valley for a long time. That's one more thing we have in common. And last but not least, Daniel Dahm. He's been involved in the environmental movement for a very long time. He's the CEO of United Sustainability Group and a senior advisor of the World Future Council, and also a member of the Vereinigung Deutscher Wissenschaftler, VDW, as well as a BMW responsible leader. So I really look forward to the discussion, and as Herbert pointed out, change finance and finance change, a rather broad topic, but we've decided to look at two angles mainly. The one angle will be looking at regulatory frameworks, and the other angle looking at the transformation angle, what is really necessary in order to address all the various challenges that we are facing. And Peter will talk about frameworks initially, then Mariana will take over and talk about the impact investing angle, and Daniel will basically bring the two angles together in his impulse statement. So we basically have 5 minutes per person to give a brief statement, and then we will have a Q&A session, hopefully involving many of you with questions. So thanks very much for coming tonight, and first of all, I'd like to welcome Peter to the stage to open the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes, that's quite a challenge. And I want to start with saying that finance change finance is a real system question. So, and when I thought about again what is the system aspect, I came back to soccer. Soccer is something what is also in this town quite well known. And you know maybe the Dutch coach traditions is with Johan Cruyff, a name some of you may know, and he calls it total football. And that sounds today very familiar, but when he discovered that approach, he said, well, you have to look at the field that everything is moving at the same time and there is constantly a different constellation. Now, we think today that is normal to look at things like that. But then, now I would say 20, 30 years ago, it was not. It was really linear thinking also on the field of football. And he discovered that everything is moving all at the same time. And even if you have not the ball, the whole game, you still play a part. So that is system thinking. And I think it's very important because the Club of Rome has grown its name so successfully because of system thinking. Now, finance. Finance is organized not in a system way. It's extremely linear, not circular, what in itself is quite a problem for the economy and for achieving sustainability goals. It's even more linear than the real economy, what it should support. So that's one thing. It's also based on the idea that you can only be successful if there is growth. Economic growth is a very strong belief in society that can solve everything. There are many people still who say you can only solve the environmental questions if you grow the economy. So that's another, particularly in finance, a very strong element. And the third one, what is not helping at the moment in finance, that is completely disconnected from the real economy. We have seen that in the financial crisis, you all know the stories. And even today, I feel with this quantitative easing done by the ECB in Frankfurt, but also in other parts of the world, the enormous effort governments make to compensate for everything with a lot of inflation is something what is completely disconnected from the real questions in the real economy. Who will earn what and who can owns what? That is where it is really about, not about the money question. So I think that it's very important that we do not only look at things we finance, but also look at the finance system itself. Now, I come as a CEO of Triodos Bank from financing change. Many, many projects we have financed. And actually, in the last 10 years, I started really to become more interested into change finance. What needs to be done in the system that we not get stuck in a very nice bubble, very nice niche of financing good projects, sustainable projects, but that we really make the system, financial system, work in a direction that everything becomes sustainable. I think that's really the task of change finance. That's how we call it. And I think what is important, if you look at change finance, Mariana will talk more about financing change. What is incredibly important to show that it can be done, but to make it a system question, to make it a system change, more has to be done. One of the things what is starting to happen that, for example, central banks realize that environmental questions, social questions are part of a system risk. And you know, a central bank requires capital from banks, commercial banks, to operate in the field. And more they can see now that if you go in a direction of the economy what is not sustainable, like fossil fuels, you should have more capital because there is more risk. That is something we could not discuss even 5 years ago. Today we can discuss it. ECB is looking into it. It's changing step by step. And I think that is a real change finance measure on a system level. I think it's very important. The second question is the creation of money. It's a mystery for many people. How is money created? Who can do that? And there is a lot of it. And suddenly there is more, and we have inflation. And I think it's a very important social question, I would say, environmental question. Who is in charge of creating money? Because if we do not get that right as a society, we always will have the short-term solutions and not the long-term solutions. So many people think today maybe it's very good what all these central banks are doing, creating more money, more money, more money. I think it's actually hiding a much deeper problem. What is the difference between the rich and the poor in the world? Because the rich have assets, asset inflation will make them even richer. The poorer people get poorer and poorer, and that will create new issues, environmentally and socially. So I think we have to look at the question of the creation of money as well. And then we have to reconnect the bank's real to the real economy. That means that you should think about the role of banks, the position, the governance of bank in society. Now we think a bank is just a business as any other business, working for its shareholders. But I think that it's incredibly important that banks become what we could call today part of the commons. That is not only private, not only public, but in between, and serving the real economy. Because we all know that banks tend to privatize gains and socialize losses. That's exactly a proof of the situation that banks should have a special governance in society, and you should really look at that more carefully as society. What are they doing there? So I think that are three big changes in finance change. I can talk for more than an hour about it, but I'm not allowed to. I think I'm already over 5 minutes. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here. And thank you for having me, the alibi woman here. Well, anyways, I'm deeply pleased to be here because I take a totally different view on how we define what is impact investing today, how we understand it in Germany, particularly in general in the world, and what should be in the future. And I'd like to start with something that is actually a big problem in our society. And this is the word finance, profit, and money. These are almost insults these days. In the face of the grand global challenges, everyone who deals with finances, is an investor or is a philanthropist, is actually being insulted or looked weirdly at. Whereas, on the other hand, everyone who wants to have an impact needs exactly that. We all need money to address that. So this is a direct reflection of the discrepancy, of the schizophrenia of the society in which we live. Because we do have the ability to address the grand global challenges with money, with printed money. The question is, do we do it? And with that, I have arrived, and I'm only coming this actually from a very, very tiny percentage of all finances, and that is venture capital. These are the investments that are being made into young entrepreneurs. 90% of all businesses are generated by young entrepreneurs, and they are not treated appropriately by the finance system, by the society. But this is where I come in, and this is what integral investing actually means, is the integration between for-profit and not-for-profit. Because this is the primary schizophrenia in which we live today. If you want to invest, like me, in a startup company, you have to make the decision up front. Is it a not-for-profit or is it a for-profit? Well, what kind of decision is that? And this is what integral investing means. We need to get rid of, this is what we need to change in terms of financing change. And then if you have passed that, well, let's say you decided for-profit or not-for-profit, where does the money go? And in order to make that decision, not only into what to invest and how to invest, the question in the face of the grand global challenges, and those are not few. We are in the Club of Rome, and we are telling you day in and day out that we only have less than 10 years to set our system such that we will survive. And I'm also a mother. And I don't know, maybe other people hate their kids. That's why they don't do enough. But I don't. So if you love your children, we need to do something about it. I'm a computer scientist, studied artificial intelligence way back when most people didn't even know what informatics was. But I also studied history. And I believe that we can learn a lot from history. For instance, Joseph Tainter, I don't know, those of you who are in anthropology, has written an amazing book. It's called The Collapse of Complex Societies. And in it, he actually analyzed what made complex societies collapse, like the Roman society, like the Mayan societies, like the Sumerians. And his results, the result of his analysis is that complex society collapse when the society itself is no longer able to finance the increasing complexity of the society, the increasing sectors of the society. And this is exactly what we're doing right now. We are in the middle of a situation where we keep printing money in order to finance the expenses that we have. So we are basically in a society that is collapsing. And economists, we talked about changing economy, talk within this context about the law of diminishing returns. You invest more, that actually comes back. And as a computer scientist, and this is where my hope comes in for all of us, I can tell you where, from my perspective, hope comes in. And that is from the law of accelerated returns. Where is that coming from? Who is familiar with that? The law of accelerated returns? Well, I'm glad you're here. Ray Kurzweil, he wrote many years ago a book, Singularity is Near. And that comes from an analysis, actually, that he performed by looking at the evolution of technology, where the human brain that doesn't have a limitation, economy has limitations, we can't grow indefinitely, but the human ingenuity and creativity doesn't. So if you go over time and look at what we collectively and individually and then compounded have been able to create, then you see that technology is able to bring these extraordinary, exponentially growing returns. Every one of you has probably an iPhone in your pocket. That is the result of that. Prior to 2007, that would have not been possible because the technology, individual technology in terms of computing or networks or sensors or data imaging, did not exist, or if they existed, they were not converging. But around 2007, they converged and the iPhone was born. And you can find this all over the place. And this is where hope comes from. So in the face of all the tragedies, all the resource reduction, all the issues that we have, I am very positive that human ingenuity can come up with a proper solution in time. So there are many examples. I don't have time to go into them as to not only about the iPhone, but you see those developments within the food industry, in the transport industry, in the materials industry, and that's where the hope comes from. So in summary, transformation is feasible. And this is the title of a report that has been instrumental for the way we drive our money and finances and the way we invest. That was a report that came out 2018 to the Club of Rome. And in there, it says how we can all implement the UN SDGs, which is what impact investing is, right? How can we implement the UN SDGs within planetary boundaries? What does that mean? Our planet says no, stop. So if we want to have an impact, we need to have that impact and remain within the operating system of the planet. And this is what this report does. And this is what technology can do. And this is where the hope for me, for us, and for you, I hope, comes from. So in summary, technology is there. It is converging. The political will is there. We can print money that is needed to make it happen. The leadership is needed. We need to unite. Please, please join forces. Let's get rid of not invented here syndrome. Let's get rid of the silos. Oh, I am doing better impact than do, and I do it around the corner to the right. No, let's join forces if we want to succeed. And with that, I'm coming actually to the end, because I think if we do not achieve what we should be achieving, there's only one reason, and this is what is in here, is the pollution in our own mind. And I'm inviting you to address that with a final quote by JFK. We all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. And we are all mortals. Let's have fun. Thank you.
All right, so being number 3 after you both is not so easy as well. And so I try to move and to shift a bit the perspective. And I also start with a small quote of Albert Schweitzer. I'm life that wants to live amidst of life that wants to live. Ich bin Leben, das leben will, inmitten von Leben, das leben will. Aristoteles developed the term economy, And Aristoteles did differ between the economia and the grammatistic. The grammatistic is the art of producing money, and it is contradictory to the art of keeping a household. If you bring the grammatistic together with the economia, there will come something like the rise of a psychopathic idea of our world. That was the statement of Aristoteles. Never bring the grammatistic together with the art of householding of economia. In other words, financial capital swims on the natural capital of our world, like the foam on a wave. And we as humans, with all our institutions, our infrastructures, are interfacing between the oceans and the big diversity and manifoldiness of life, and the foam of our ideas that are a result, that are outcomes of our experiences of our world. While we grew up in a co-evolution, and Homo sapiens is a species that is since 1.4 million years trying to negotiate between the natural fundamentals of life and our own demands and wishes to the world, our own ideas of welfare, our own ideas of consumerism, we are facing since at least the middle of the last century our own planetary boundaries that were mentioned already. And the planetary boundaries are in danger because if we go beyond the several dimensions that Rockström, Steffens, and others from the Stockholm Resilience Center addressed, we are reaching tipping points where our ecological system of our planet will collapse. The main dangers we have in the biogeochemical flows, in the landscapes, the functional diversity of ecosystems, the genetical diversity based on the diversity of specimen on our planet Earth. We also have the dimension of climate, and the dimension of water, while the water crisis is threatening us heavily and brings us under really heavy constraints in our own living conditions, while the climate system damages are mostly popular in the media. We can count CO2. That makes it easier to quantify. But the thermodynamic system of our climate system, the thermodynamic flows, are going much quicker. So these thermic reactions are nothing else than the results of an ecosystem that is in complete imbalance. When I founded United Sustainability in the year 2009, our first claim was everything is impact. And if we talk about impact investing today, we mostly forget that the broadest impact human economy and human investment is bringing into the world is the ecological collapse, is the natural endangerment of our species and of the peace and the justice and fairness, the freedom, and let's say the empathy of our planet Earth that is needed to deal in between our diverse ideas of wealth and of living together. So if we want to have a sustainable economy, we need to install and to update, to transform the interfaces, the infrastructures with which we deal with our natural environment as humanity. And that means we have to address the real assets, die Sachwerte, the infrastructures, the ecosystems, the soil of the landscapes, and the integrity of the ecological systems that are carrying us as humanity. What we did forget in the 20th century, where we were talking about growth, was that this growth was based on extraction, based on robbery. based on the exploitation of natural resources, of material resources and energetic resources, and also of the ecological resilience of our planet Earth. We are facing that today also in the conflict we are seeing in the moment between Ukraine and Russia, or let's say the conflict that is where we have a melting pot of endangerment of our let's say national economies in a new world order. So we need first, and with that I come to the point for this first minutes, we need first a methodological reshaping of investment cultures. That means the minimum of sustainability that we have to achieve if we have to talk about good impact is that we negotiate every negative damage to the natural environments, to our fundamentals of life. So no negative externalities into our natural environments, no destruction of natural capital anymore. Secondly, we have to externalize benefits. So externalization of benefits means we have to rebuild, to regenerate the degradations of the past, and we have to rebuild the planetary biocapacity everywhere on our planet Earth. To achieve this, we need other political regulatories. That means a regulatory framework that makes it possible that sustainable investments, that good impact investments, are competitive, they can compete against the fossil, the destructive investments of the past. We have to install a socio-ecological market economy, and we have to push out capitalism. Capitalism is based on the over-prioritization of financial capital against natural capital and social capital. So, and last but not least, we have to stop using good, sustainable investments as legitimation to invest in a broad field of negative impact investments all over the world. So having a foundation that is investing most of its own money into negative impacts to the world, to achieve and to finance positive impact meetings, like we can see in the F20 Foundation platform. Have a look on that in the internet, where you see a lot of meetings of big foundations who have their own money invested in the destruction and the degradation of our planet Earth to talk about positive impact. So for that we need a deep shift of our own mentalities, of our own understanding of what economy is, and we have to keep in mind that there's no practical economy possible without investing in it, but there will be never a standalone sustainable investment economy without a real economy on the other side that strengthens the regeneration of life without having a life-serving strategy for all of our economic endeavors. So thank you very much, and Jörg.
Thank you very much to all three speakers, and may I invite you to the stage. And there's a microphone for every one of you.
Fantastic. Tolle Barhocker hier. Wahnsinnig teuer, habe ich gehört.
Oh, okay.
It's one for each one of you. So it's interesting that in one shape or another, each one of you spoke about balance from different perspectives. And Peter started speaking about banking needs to be reconnected to the real economy, taking as a given that the financial sector has created a life of its own. So maybe you could give us a few more examples how you think that may be possible, how banks can really be reconnected and be put back in touch with the real economy.
Well, I can give you an example of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. That is a group of banks globally working along the lines of human values. There are about 70. We founded it in 2009. And we did a research where we looked at the balance sheets of the top 50 banks in the world and the 50 banks of the Global Alliance, and looked at a couple of things. And one of the things was how much of the balance sheet of each bank was actually invested in the real economy. And you found out that these global banks had about 30% of the balance sheet invested in the real economy. The rest was in financial markets. And with these banks, more grassroots banks, I would say, that was 70% was invested in the real economy. So you can see that from a regulatory point of view, you could really look at banks and say, well, for resilience reasons only and for being close to the real economy, a bank should have at least, and I'm not saying that's happening now, but that would be nice if they would have at least 60-70% of their balance sheet in the real economy. That would force banks to say, well, we only attract money what we really can invest and not what we can invest in abstract markets. So I think in the end regulation is needed in that sense and can actually give good boundaries for banks to work in and be closer to the real economy.
Thank you, and that's a good key point. You're talking about resiliency, and there are various studies that basically confirm that green companies or companies focused on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are more resilient. And maybe Mariana can say a few things from her vantage point about her investment goals and what she thinks about resiliency in the context of investing, and in that way addressing those critical challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, well, the resilience comes always from people. So 80% of the risk in early stage investing, which is what I do, it's the highest possible risk, and I think this is useless. But it comes from the people. So integral investing, the model that my husband and I, who sits in there, have developed over the past 30 years, is rooted on the people. So we look at the people very deeply. I actually went back to school and got my PhD in psychology as a computer scientist because I needed to stand on 2 feet. Why is that important? Because when people need money or look for whatever to finance their startup, they would tell you everything. But not only the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists who are fundraising, they go and to the limited partners and tell them, oh, we're going to deliver this. And so basically what we currently have, and people present are excluded, there are 2 types of liars standing in front of each other. The VP, the venture capitalist lying to the LPs, and the entrepreneur lying to the venture capitalists in order to get the money. So how do you prevent that? Well, if you walk in and say, well, I'm only investing to implement the UN SDGs within planetary boundaries, then all of a sudden people say, oh my God, you're interested actually why I want to do the startup, why I'm willing to work around the clock, without any compensation, because there's a mission. And you, as a venture capitalist, and by the way, I believe that everyone is an investor, is interested in why people do what they do. And they care deeply. So the conversation takes a totally different turn. So it's more real. So you don't talk about, and of course we are taking a risk, but then we are all in the same boat. We are willing to go all the way through to succeed because there is a higher intention on the line, a higher goal. So this is what it means, integral investing. And the question is, how do you, as an investor, make sure that people will keep their promise? Because, they can, and they mean it. But how do you identify their ability to really deliver? to that promise. And this is why I spent 5 years studying. I identified several tools from Stanford, Harvard, and MIT, which we use in identifying the players, in building the teams. And it's not about them versus us, and we're better because we have the money. No, this is BS. It's about us together. It's about where am I on my journey toward higher levels of consciousness, because we're all going to die, right? But there is a journey that we're all going together while we do what we do. And I mean, I've been a meditator. I meditated for 42 years. So higher levels of consciousness are important in this context. And so we want to see how we can work together in growing, because there is no limits to consciousness growth. And I think I'll stop here because I could go forever. Thank you.
I can tell. So thank you for that intervention. And Daniel, you specifically highlighted the transformation of infrastructures as a necessary vehicle in order to make a difference, so real value. So I know that one of your focus areas is really investing in real assets. So maybe you can say a few words how you think a transformation can be brought about specifically with that focus in mind.
Okay, Peter was addressing the investment cultures in bank houses and the banking sector. The big money is worldwide moved mostly by institutional investors, regulated institutional investors and not regulated institutional investors. They all have long-term perspectives and needs for value preservation, and they all have the demand for risk-adjusted and predictable cash flows. On the other hand, they have, if we look back over the last 3 decades, an average return on investment of around 2%, most of the time less than that. So if we take out mathematical tricks and we count out the financial engineering leverage effects, and we take out some survivorship biases, we find out, okay, 1.5 to 2.2% of return per year is already a quite positive average that we can count out for institutional investment. So for this group of investors, in fact, sustainable infrastructures, real economy in the field of sustainable development, real assets, technical infrastructures as water purification and desalination, renewable energy production, irrigation systems for agroecology, organic fertilizer infrastructures, pipes and cables, also mobility infrastructures, but even more, the ecological infrastructures that we are using, timber and agro products, are part of the biggest volumes on the world markets that are bartered there. They are ideal assets for the investment of institutional investors, in fact. But there is a big pressure on liquidity on the market. So in Europe, we have Basel and Solvency that are legitimating the ability of investing into illiquid assets in alternative investments. And even more, an illiquid asset and the alternative assets are mixing up very different investment types. For example, a hedge fund, gold and precious metals are in the same risk cluster like a solar power plant, and that is absolutely absurd. Furthermore, institutional investors have still to provide 49% of Eigenkapital, the English, of equity, equity part from the credits they or from the investment they get by other investors or they get by international finance markets. So that brings a big pressure on these institutional investors to fulfill their regulatory compliance needs. And for that, we need a shift, a paradigm shift to incent and to strengthen the ability to invest in real economy, in real assets. Until today, there's worldwide not one investment fund existing that offers a systematic investment in sustainable real assets with a broad diversification and also with a broad market that has an international spread between the cultures and the different national economies. With that, we are trying with United Sustainability to enter the market and to provide a competitive alternative to liquid asset investments into for example, stock market investments. And that, to add this, also needs an accountability, because that we don't have yet. The EU taxonomy is a greenwashing instrument, but it's not usable for having the natural impact into our balance sheets, and with that to showing our real risks that we produce in our on our investment locations. So.
No, that's a great keyword, and that was actually going to be my next question about the EU sustainable finance reform, and specifically the taxonomy, which recently also included nuclear and gas as defining them as sustainable. So maybe from your various perspectives, you can also say a few words on that, whether in your from your perception, the sustainability criteria are being met, or whether, as Daniel suggested, we are not doing ourselves a service, including nuclear and gas in that. And obviously linked to that question, the repercussions we are experiencing right now as far as gas is concerned with the crisis in the Ukraine, which obviously hints at the fact that gas may not be the greatest idea after all. Any thoughts on that, and maybe linked to the ongoing crisis in the Ukraine?
Everyone is looking at me.
Everybody's looking at you.
Well,
I'm asking all of you, basically.
Thank you. I'm probably the wrong person, because I grew up in communist Romania, 8 kilometers away from Ukraine. So I saw the Russian tanks waiting to invade Romania in 1968. So I'm I'm not sure I'm the right person to talk about this. I think what we're currently experiencing is exactly what we should have done. We are not prepared to be shock resistant, and actually Putin did us a big service because now we are getting ready. And my take on nuclear power and gas, it's probably the intention, and you're closer to that than I am, tries to provide a bridge to future technologies until what I was just talking about in my speech. The technology is available to provide sustainable energy, but we're not there yet. And so, as a bridge energy supplier, that's what atomic nuclear power plants and gas are out to do for us. Yeah, so that's my take on it. But everyone else can please.
I may add something short. In fact, this conflict shows us what we missed in the last decades, and we cannot build up in a short time now system-relevant infrastructures and interfaces for our daily needs. We need to have livelihoods, material livelihoods, in the field of energy production, and that is something the Club of Rome is voting for since many decades. the Green Party is since at least the 1980s advocating for a complete transformation and a new build-up of a renewable energy sector worldwide. I was one of the founders of the Desertec Foundation. That project failed completely 10 years ago because of the industrial interests of several stakeholders there. But also other projects did fail like that. So we were completely lost over the last decades in a virtualized financial cosmos, what is more or less esoteric. And we all, independently from the Ukraine-Russian catastrophe that we are experiencing every day in the news, also Corona showed us that we had a complete underestimation of the health sector, of the education sector, of our public infrastructures, of our social infrastructures that helped us to master this crisis. And apart from that, we have a big international gap between the least developed countries and the industrialized, consume-oriented, commercialized Western European Christian cultures and economies. I grew up, I'm unfortunately sorry, Mariana, when you told me about 1968, that the Russian tanks that you saw, I didn't saw anything in 1968 because I was born 1969. But in 1974, I already saw the victims of the poverty and of the hunger in sub-Saharan Africa, and I still see them. And I still see us exploiting their resources, their jewels, their precious materials, their energy, and it's very helpful if the population there is poor, because it is easy to get a good price of someone who is in hunger if he is instead of that sitting on resources and energy. So the colonialism has its flower in the modern European, Western, US, American societies.
Are you impressed yet?
And the good message of that, Mariana, the good message of that is there's a lot of money and there's so much where we can invest it. And all that will develop and deliver wealth preservation. And maybe that is something where Peter, as the master in his biography in wealth preservation for people, can help us a bit, because isn't it that small-scale investors like you and me have the same interests like institutional investors? We want to see where our money is, and if it makes sense and it delivers us at least 1% or something, we are happy already. Yeah, that's working.
This is also working. I go back 1 minute to this taxonomy, this European taxonomy for investment products, for investment firms. I've been involved in it, in the creation of it, although it is in the end a project of the European Union. I was very negative in the beginning about it, but I do think it's actually a positive development. I think you see quite a lot of things happening now, the European Green Deal, the Green Taxonomy. It's all a signal that things are becoming mainstream. And that is going with a lot of pain, because if you go mainstream, you are faced by the old paradigm. And the old paradigm is something different than the sustainable green paradigm. And that costing pain. So I was very happy that we go a very long way with the taxonomy. And suddenly there were the interest of Germany and France. Germany wanted to keep gas in the taxonomy and France nuclear. And that's politics. They then have to negotiate and say, well, we do both. Nobody, you could also see we both, let's go, but they don't. And that is politics. And I think we're dealing still with politics where you want to compromise on things on the short term and are still lacking the courage, I would say, to have a long-term vision. But it's happening at least. It's in the open and people discuss it. The advisors in the European Union were very upset, the internal directors who created this whole taxonomy, that it went this way. So there's a lot of younger people particularly who really want to see this changing. So that's the positive. And it will take another 5 years, and then I think we make very clear that nuclear and gas are not part of it, and that we should really go to social inclusion, real green projects, and that will send a message to many more investors. But that's the pain we are going through, and there are many of these processes going on, and I think there will be more in the coming years. Agriculture is the same. We have to go to a more sustainable agriculture. We have war now, and suddenly people say, well, let's wait with sustainable agriculture. People don't know what they are talking about. Non-sustainable agriculture still is depending on Russia for inputs, and so forth and so on. So we have to go through all this thinking to see that you can have a resilient system also based on local activities, and make the dependency, the global idea of we sort it out all through market economies globally, that is simply too early. Maybe in 100 years we can do that, maybe 200 years, but today we have to make also local resilience work. And I think that's what we are facing at the moment.
So, thank you very much for your input. I mean, the key word I take away from what you're saying is really that change takes time. However, we don't really have time. That's one of the problems we are facing, the urgency of it all. But I'd like to open up Q&A for the audience. So please raise your arm if you have a question, and also tell us your name and your background, what industry you work in, so that we can contextualize. And please also say which person you're addressing the question to. So no arm yet.
Comments are also allowed.
Brief comments are allowed, as long as they're very brief. So please watch the time. There's one question here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, first of all. Thank you very much, first of all, for this inspiring words. I'm happy to come here from Frankfurt. So thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Mariana. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm Sebastian Galler. I'm an engineer. So I doubt a little bit of technology is really solving all the problems, because I'm working every day with it. I'm an engineer helping in big industries, dirty industries, to come to do the transition to decarbonize. That's my profession. Peter, I'm with you that this EU taxonomy and the Fit for 55 thing at all is something really interesting, and is challenging especially the financial sector by re-evaluating their risks on different dimensions. Do you think that this in the end leads, or can normalize a little bit this financial flows that, as you said, every time go into the financial sector, or do you think the opposite will do that? The financial the money is flowing into these not so directly capable investments more than into the direct industry, where you can count, as Daniel said, the CO2 by ton. I don't know exactly what
yeah, probably the financial sector will be last, but I think we realize in the economy after COVID, after now the war, after all those things, that resilience is a much more important factor in running the economy than we thought 10 years ago. So 10 years ago it was about lean and mean. So the less equity you had, the less buffer you had, the more profitable you were. And suddenly, I think already with the financial crisis, they looked at banks and they thought, well, a leverage ratio of 2% or less, you mean 2% equity on a balance sheet total in such volatile markets. Impossible. And of course, it went wrong and the government had to help the banks. So the whole notion of resilience as part of looking at economics and maybe giving up short-term profits for that is coming in and will help also the banks to focus in the right direction where to put money in. So equity will be much more important. Resilience will be much more important. And resilience is not just financial equity. It's also loyal customers, loyal shareholders, this whole loyalty question comes back again, I think, and that's a positive development, I would say. So being maybe paying a little bit more for local renewable energy than far away is maybe a good thing to do. So that sort of notion in the thinking of economists is relatively new and is starting to help society to think in a different way how we organize things. And that also helps banks to look in a different way to businesses they finance.
So you are more positive in this.
I see. If I look at the day-to-day, I'm not so positive. If I zoom out a little bit more and I look at the last 10 years, I say, well, we start to learn more about what a business should look like, and that it's not about sort of theoretical cash flows for the next 3 years. It's about asking the questions where Mariana also was referring to the entrepreneur. Who are your co-workers? Who are your customers? Very direct questions. And that is also resilience. And how do you relate to the environment? Do you take responsibility for that? Do you feel that you need a license to operate from society and not just go for it because freedom for everybody and see where it ends? That is changing now, and I think that's positive.
The IPCC, the International International Panel on Climate Change, came out with its recently came out with its last part of its current report, stating that systemic transformation is really crucial, and that's what you are hinting at. And again, the matter of time and urgency that certain challenges need to be addressed sooner rather than later. So any more questions, Seda?
Hi, I'm Seda Röder from. I'm the managing partner at an innovation consultancy company called The Mindshift, and we've just finished Beethoven's 10th Symphony using AI. Yeah, that's us. One thing that my company and I have been exploring a lot, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been addressed within the context of social change, is blockchain. How you get rid of the middleman, and all of these systems, the financial systems, are going to be changing drastically, because within the blockchain system right now, you can crowdfund any idea that is going to have a huge social impact, especially for the underprivileged communities. And there's been a lot of work going on with the DAOs and NFTs. We see that if the real assets in this world won't give people the possibility to bring self-actualization into fruition, they invent a new world. And many people have no idea about how to populate that kind of new world. So what's your take on this? I would ask the panel.
Thank you very much for that, because that is a very important aspect, also addressing the venture capital, the innovation processes, and also addressing the banking sector very much. If we talk about distributed ledger technologies, what is the fundament on what blockchain is based? And I was working on that with Andrew Keys, who was one of the founders of Ethereum already 8 years ago. There was the basic idea to develop a new governance of, let's say, economy of the real world. And it was the idea to interface our analogous daily life, our real world, with the virtual digitalized cosmos that more or less is also the space where financial economy finds place, because the big scaling up of financial economy happened mainly from the 90s upwards, and started to substitute the GDP more and more by virtualized assets. And with the blockchain, we have the opportunity to outcompete the centralization and accumulation processes that are happening in the economy since 20, 30 years more and more. In fact, what was also something what we did before characterized with the classical idea of financial capitalism, that is centralization, accumulation, and also the pushing out of participants of the markets to become servants of the markets instead of being active within the market. And that is the basic idea of a pluralistic market economy, that everyone can take part and that stakeholders become shareholders as well, and they are not only serving the few who are greedy on the top. By the way, having nice quotations, you started with that. My friend Vandana Shiva updated the quotation of Gandhi, and she says, Gandhi said, the world has not enough for everyone's greed, but enough for everyone's need. And Vandana said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for a few people's greed. So with the blockchain, with distributed ledger technology, we can overcome that conflict and we can establish a stakeholder-driven economy, what is really pluralistic, what is highly innovative, and with which we can produce something like a co-creation of economy where everyone is involved and we have collaborative ownerships of, and now I come back, of real assets, of the infrastructures. With that we interface to our natural base of life. And that also eradicates classical risks. And we have to keep in mind that on the one side, if we talk about profit, on the other side we have to talk about risks. And im Deutschen Rendite-Risiko-Verhältnis. Yeah, so most of the time the people only talk about the profitability, but no one would invest into something. You can for sure bring a lot of examples for that. What is highly profitable, but is also high risky, then most of the people wouldn't invest in that. So we need to rise down the risks, and with that we will push out the banking sectors and the classical financial intermediaries. So swarm investment in combination with IoT and artificial intelligence will be the future infrastructure, the non-material infrastructure that helps us as humans to interface to our natural environment. And we are dealing then with complexity without leveling complexity down. And that is a very important aspect of co-evolution, what we can already describe over 3.8 billion years of biological evolution on our planet Earth. So it is interesting that exactly now, when humanity needs that, a technical idea appears that makes us or brings us into closer to the ability to overcome the crisis of today and to deal with a pluralistic world with all the pluralistic stakeholders that are surrounding and inhabiting that world.
So let me ask you something. Actually, then you can add your thoughts. So disintermediation really as a key word, but also as you suggested earlier, accelerated growth from a technology perspective, and maybe you can also respond to the need for human transformation and behavior change. Because if anything, that's what I was missing in your statement supporting technology acceleration. So maybe you can add to that as well, in addition to Seda's question on blockchain and disintermediation.
And you're a computer scientist.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. There is one comment that I would like to make with respect to what you just said, and I subscribe to all of that, is and I wouldn't be in the Club of Rome if I didn't say that. We need to make sure that the creation of the blockchain is sustainable, because right now it's energetically not sustainable. So that's a big problem. And so I'm hoping that quantum computing will address that. Excuse me?
Bitcoin blockchain is not, but there are blockchains and there are...
Well, the question will be what happens when quantum computing is is available. So that will have an entire different world. But that's not what I just wanted to add to that, because it's in my view a big problem. When people go and create,
Yeah, but if you don't know which kind of blockchain you're this misconception that blockchain is generally something bad, and that's not. So it depends on what kind of blockchain
I know.
And even Ethereum is right now changing how they work.
Which is exactly what needs to happen. And that's what I was trying to say. So there's a lot more work to go around. And with respect to, to the uplifting message, that's what I wanted to add before. With respect to technology, I just wanted to look at the numbers because the numbers speak for themselves. And I subscribe to what you just said. When you go down on a day-to-day business, everything could look pretty depressing. But if you take the bird's eye view and look at the entire picture, then there is a lot of hope. And this is exactly what I wanted to bring to this table, because collectively, if we collectively set our minds and work together, we can address issues. Well, and we better be. I mean, what's the outcome if we don't? Are we going to die all here? I'm not ready for it. So the convergence, here are the numbers. What are the sectors of the society that we need to address? Well, food, first and foremost. And when we look at the development in synthetic biology, for instance, and the creation of artificial meat, or all the alternatives that 10 years ago, precision protein fermentation, you would pay $1 million for a kilogram. And today it's between $20 and, $15 and $20. So there is so much that's going on. And I'm not, I wrote it in my book, I'm not taking the time to go into the details. But this is a wonderful indication that we are moving in the right direction and the right things are happening. Number two, when it comes to the convergence of energy, what are the numbers? The solar number, the price per annum is decreasing by 82% per annum in the solar industry. As a generalization, the same in the wind industry, 46% per annum, and batteries, 87% per annum decrease. So put this all together, we are on the right track. Yes, there is much more to do, but I take these numbers as an inspiration and a courage to really continue on this path. We can do it. And the same thing is transportation. I don't know, our son is 24 years old, and he doesn't want to have a car. I'm sorry for BMW, but we're moving toward transportation as a service, which is, for me, an amazing development. So what we need is the service I want to get from A to B. I don't need to own a car and park it in the street a whole week. And that's the result of a convergence also of, that I want to bring into your awareness, our awareness again, of three things. The on-demand, you don't want a car, you want the transportation. The second is autonomous driving, which is coming, and I know we all have our opinions. Is it good, is it bad? But it serves the greater good. And, of course, electric cars. And I know there are up and downs, and, of course, batteries are expensive and rare earth and blah, blah, blah. But together, we are on the right trajectory. So this is an addition.
There are all kinds of signals suggesting that we are moving from what one may call a male paradigm towards a female paradigm, which is more about collaboration and integration and paying attention to externalities that most of us men have caused at least a few decades, if not a few hundreds of years ago.
I need to set the record straight. Please join me in this. I refuse to talk about men and women. Please, let's talk about the feminine energy and the masculine energy that is available in all of us. And we can cultivate those that we need to cultivate more. Please, not men and women conversation. I'm saying that as a woman.
I didn't suggest that.
I just wanted to make sure.
I'm grateful you're making that point, because it's really about a change of values which both men and women need to incorporate into their actions. But Peter wanted to make another point, I think, in response to the discussion.
I think technology is not a problem. It's like gravity. It comes, and I've never been worried, also in the bank, about technology. What I'm really worried about is governance around it. And I think many people who are very fond of technology forget about the governance. And then you run into big problems. We have seen the cryptos, the cryptocurrency, There's not a logical idea behind it. It's a pyramid game, if you're honest. And all the crypto platforms who have been created in the Netherlands, they're just crooks. They just want to make money short term. And the whole society feels it's innovation. No, it's not. Blockchain is innovation. Blockchain is an innovation, but it is one in the step of many new innovations. So I see blockchain as a form of innovation, and there are many others. And I think they should come, they can help. But if we do not get the governance right, how people are involved, and know how they can deal with this technology, then it becomes a very elitist game again, and not for the people on the ground. So they need other things. So I feel we have to be careful by thinking that technology will solve things. I don't think that it does. Governance does. I make it a little bit provocative, otherwise it's such a friendly discussion.
So to involve more players in the audience, there was another question over there.
My name is Yossi Reich. I'm the founder. Well, I'm not so used to talk to a microphone. My name is Yossi Reich. I'm the founder of fairplanet.org, which is a platform for journalism and activism. And relating to what Peter said about governance, I'm missing like the very basic things in the discussion a little bit. The thing about what we were talking about food, but if we talk about consumption, about food, and about what we wear, and about what we consume from the point of nature, from the point of global warming, actually 80% of what we consume, or 90% of what we consume, should be illegal. And this is and we are running out of time. This is also this decade, and we have less than a decade to achieve the 1.5 degree aim. So I'm asking myself, where is the awareness, and where is the Hebel? How do you say in English? I'm listening to the leverage. How could I forget this word? Where is the leverage to change governance, to change laws, and to go into this direction? And this is especially if it comes to food and to clothes that are like really destructing something like, I don't know, more than 60% of the climate problem for the moment. So this is my question also to the speakers.
I would like to add on all these 3 points and also what you said, Mariana, because I completely agree. The conflict we are facing today is a governance conflict. What we have also to know and to understand is that investing is governance activity. So with finances, we are directing power, economic power. We are directing decisions. And when I addressed the least developed countries, and I don't mean only the least developed countries, I mean more or less the rest of the world, apart from the Western European, US, American, Japanese, and also now Chinese elitarian high commercial economies, we have to keep in mind that 80% of the world food production is executed and provided by small-scale farmers. Over 85% of the human population are living in coastal areas of the tropical areas worldwide. 70% of the full labor volume or work volume that is carried out worldwide is unpaid, and it doesn't need to be paid. Yeah, so just around 30% of the work that is done worldwide is part of the extrinsic driven financial monetarized working sector. If you addressed the topic of blockchain, distributed ledger technology, you addressed, I would say now more abstract, that we don't stick on that term blockchain, the need and the opportunities that we have now to develop new models of economic participation, that we develop new models of economic governance that makes a stakeholder governance possible, where we are shifting away of big centralized institutions governing the broad population that is mostly directed to subsistence, autarky, and their daily needs and demands. If we don't execute and if we are not successful with this shift to another governance model, we will never close the gap between the so-called global north and the global south. And with that, we are producing conflicts in near future that are similar to that we are facing now between Ukraine and Russia. And already this kind of conflict is happening everywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and we have a lot of these conflicts also in South America and Latin America. So the question what you were asking for, wo sind die Hebel, where are the leverages to quickly come into another economic perspective so that we can shift global economy in the direction of a fair and just world order that provides and regenerates sustainable livelihoods for all humans and all people of our planet Earth. For that, we have to, let's say, sharpen and dynamizing and speeding up the process Peter was addressing when you were talking about the taxonomy. If we will have soon the opportunity that every investment is also measured in its risk profile via the systemic risks that are connected with this investment, if they lower the risks or if they rise up the risks for environment and also for social not sticking together, let's say social resilience, social integrity, we will not come to a new and strong economic governance worldwide, and also to another direction for the finance streams of the world. So that will be. And I was talking about our friend Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker, a question of the political framework. And Ernst is always addressing that we need a strong governance model that is realizing itself in the regulations and policy of order that we produce, especially in the strong economies and for finance markets. And we're in the beginning, but we have to accelerate that, we have to concrete that, and we have to come to a real true cost accounting and to overcome sustainability reporting and pseudo-good impact reporting. Yeah? Impact investment is a narrative of the near past. The future is sustainable, non-ideologic investments into real infrastructures, protecting and safeguarding humanity in their different ecological and environmental contexts.
So there are 4 more questions. Since time is of the essence, let's maybe ask 2 and 2 so that the remaining questions can at least be asked. So there's one here.
Yes, hello. My name is Georg Brockstermann. I run a non-profit company called Games Forest Club, where we bring together the global games industry with reforestation problems, because we have a deforestation problem, which also goes hand in hand with the governance problem you mentioned, because our structure right now and our systems right now know since 50, 60, 70 years the problem and are not acting. So my question is, do we need, how we go into the next phase, or do we need a disruption or revolution of the old system, or can we transform just the old financial system and let the guys do the job who were failing the last 70 years?
I like provocative questions. Do we need a revolution?
Okay, yes, my name is Heiko Franzen. I'm founding partner of SFSRE. We are from Frankfurt. We are an initiator of sustainable funds, creating green assets and make the whole of the fund around that. And I want to share maybe your experience with investors, with institutional investors who should be responsible for sustainable investments and as well in, let's say, in an entrepreneurial kind of being. Because what we have seen within the last month is approaching them with ideas and concrete ideas with, we always say if Marietta Slomka is talking about vertical farming in the Heute Journal, most of them, you know the Heute Journal, it seems to be that's in the middle of society. So, but if you reach institutional investors and talk about that, they're looking on you and say, okay, interesting, but I can't value it. Everybody is thinking about eating fish is so good concerning the omega-3 acid. So nobody thought about why is the acid in the fish, because he eats the algae. So why not making algae in a systematic way? And last but not least, if you talk about institutional investors and say, okay, you see tons of plastic around, consumer plastics, and there are good ideas to recyclate it back to oil. So put all these things in a traditional, I don't want to make any product placement here, but put this in an easy way in a real estate fund and explain it. You can believe me, and that would be very interesting to see your ideas and your experiences on that. Sorry, I don't have the time. I have my regulations, although I'm the fund manager and the MD and whatever with all the crowns and brilliance on my head and on my card. Sorry, I don't have the time to investigate that and to invest in your fund. This is really, really, I don't want to say that, but I'm not sure how you see that.
So here a question about inspiration from nature, here a question about revolution. So what about a biomimicry revolution?
Well, there is a revolution needed within the institutional investors. And we experience, I can only subscribe to what you just said. We moved from California 13 years ago here back to Munich. And for the 13 years, I've been trying to start a sustainable venture fund. Impossible. Particularly, well, I've lived on and off for 30 years, 35 years in Silicon Valley. I mean, that's a totally different industry. I mean, and you come here, it's not to be understood. And the reason it has to do with regulation. If you look at the pension funds, I think is it 10% that they do private equity in venture capital? 10%, around that number. And venture capital is not even 1% of that. And most of them don't even have a product that would allow them to invest in that. And if we're asking ourselves, where is this technology transformation, all that coming from? Well, not from pension funds. It's coming from the young entrepreneurs, people who actually have to fight for funds, because it's not for profit. And, I don't need to tell you how hard it is to do the fundraising. It's just a nightmare. And the reason why it's different in the United States is because, and I'm not a fan of Reagan, but he changed that regulation. He overimposed, the pension funds to really invest into venture capital. And I'm promoting venture capital just because it's high risk, but we are in a high risk situation. Our lives are on the line. So I subscribe to what you're saying, and yes, we need a revolution. And if you start one, I will be joining you.
I really love the conversation. And I have to admit also, I'm an engineer myself, so I'm adding to my fellow engineers here. We know that every problem is solvable, and this is why we all left what we're passionate about, like developing medical technologies and stuff like that, to come and see where the money is, because it's important to know what needs to be done in order to make the shifts. So we are here to talk not about disruptive technologies, but about disrupting governance and knowing that politics decide above scientifically proven best technologies to solve a problem. So let's go to this thinking of Club of Rome. Sandrine Dixon-Club is a good friend, and talk about this radical collaboration needed. What is needed to be done? Or maybe you can say one or two good examples, positive ones, where a new form of collaboration and leadership helped us to disrupt the governance issue where we're stuck, because it's really feels like being stuck.
Before you answer, there was another question over here.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, my name is Felicitas Sommer. I just did my PhD on land registries, so that's something that is centuries old and came before blockchain, but still is very important somehow. And as an anthropologist, a social and cultural anthropologist, I followed the technology and how the biographies of these technologies enshrine orders of worth and again create representations of our world, because how do states and societies see society and economy by numbers that are made by registers and taxonomies and classificational systems. So this is my perspective, which I also use, for example, for looking at the taxonomy of the EU. By the way, now I'm working in a company and I produce sustainable finance reports. But I wanted to ask Peter about the social taxonomy, and I really wonder why we haven't talked about it yet, because I think that this is such an interesting new step which tries to adopt the previous logic of the sustainable taxonomy, which is now for climate until now, but it's completely different because the previous taxonomy focuses on production and they do no significant harm minimum criteria. I mean, they are amazing, I think. They are mostly focused on production and on efficiency and on reduction on environmental risks and compliance. And now the social taxonomy is about the impact, the actual impact on consumers, regions, and municipalities. This is a whole new perspective, and I wonder how companies can show that they are eligible and aligned to these goals. And I think this is something that much more a municipality could do than a company, because all the accounting and measurement systems that were implemented by companies work in another level. So I wonder what you think about it. Sorry for this long explanation.
I can say something on it. I think it's simply more complicated, the social taxonomy. I think it's very hard to say what in different places in the world social aspects are different valued. So that is already a big difference. I know from our investment funds, it was quite important to look at if a company allows a union or not, particularly in the US. That is not the case in many questions. So there already is a different perspective. So we have to find a much more localized social context and give some numbers to it. And then the second problem is that particularly social issues cannot always be fixed in numbers. The quality of life for people is very hard to put a number on it. There is this famous, I forgot his name, this Czechian economist. I said, what is a good number? He said 43. And then he made it so absurd that we sometimes put numbers on things, that we need narratives. We need to accept... 42. It was 42. Sorry. Yeah. That is his computer. How was his name? How was? Yeah. So I do think it's more about narratives. It's accepting that you sometimes cannot put things in numbers, but describe what you do to a community, the community of your customers, the community you live in, and make it very clear what it is. The SDGs actually help there. The SDGs have elements of social dimensions who you could describe. And I really urge all companies not to select a few SDGs. They are normally the ones they score on. You go through all of them, and if you are not ready there with one SDG, you just say, this is something we have not looked into. We did it in the bank's report as well. All 17, and we said 3 or 4, we had no idea what to do, but we were honest about it, and it makes a good reflection. Now, the other question I want to say, I don't think all problems are solvable. That's a typical engineer issue. I don't think it is true. I think you can create problems who cannot be solved. And we are very much on the urge in society that we cannot solve the issue of climate change. So there you can see that's a real issue. And I think one of the big problems, if you look at the footprint, we think of Sweden as a very ecological country. They have 6 times the footprint per citizen as somebody in India or China, meaning that they have to bring back their footprint from 6 to 1. And that is that's the real problem you have to solve. And that is not just so you can solve technically. That means a different lifestyle, bring in different values, and so forth and so on. And it's not easy to solve that. So we will see.
But I think we're fixing some parameters, some variables which are flexible. It's like changing the leadership perspective and the paradigm. A lot of things that makes us take decisions. Stuck in a system, you can enlarge the boundary conditions, redefine the problem, solve it differently. And I know how technical this counts, but
no, I'm challenging you. No, I hear what you say, and I think we should never forget we have to do our utmost to create different constellations. I talked about constellations in football. You always look at the constellation, how things move, interact, but that you can say in a linear way there is a problem and there is a solution to that problem, that is something from the last century. I think now we have to deal with the complexity where other qualities play a role, and I think that's where you have to act in and see by every step, are we moving all in all to the right direction? And that's so difficult because people want clear answers. This is the problem, give me the solution. And that's not anymore what's possible, unfortunately.
So we'd like to end on a positive note. So there is another point that was another part of the question was new forms of collaboration. So and I'd like to add to that about behavior change. So maybe a couple of words or thoughts on both what you think needs to happen on an individual level and what are new forms of collaboration that are necessary in order to address and strive for change, at least. And all 3 of you, before we finally conclude. So, Mariana.
That's an easy one. How do you? I mean, who has ever tried to eat less or eat better or get rid of, stop smoking? Or, well, we have one who's succeeded.
I had a Triodos from Supervisory, also like me. 4 years ago, I read a story about an animal which gets killed in Spain with the fires. And after reading that, I go over to my wife and just told her, hey, sorry, there's something wrong in the world. And I skipped over to live as a vegan, and before I eat 3 times meat per day. And I'm not kidding you, 3 times meat per day, and the next day I stopped, I quit totally, and switched over to eat vegan or vegetarian, without thinking about is it good or bad. It just was the right way to do it. Yeah.
So, still alive. So, can everyone confirm that? Is it easy or is it difficult?
Just do
behavior change. Just do it. So it is very difficult. The question is, what is the motivation? So we all have a tipping point. So that's behavior change. It's actually very, very difficult unless you decide. And it's just 1 second. You just decide. But, I've been spending, I'm a seminar junkie for decades, so it's not an easy thing to do. I think my solution or the answer for you that I have from my perspective is we are facing such major challenges that I believe that we need proper leadership, people who go ahead, because most people cannot solve these problems. There are few people who can. And so it's a leadership issue. And that leadership, and this is what I'm doing from my perspective, also when I invest. I look at, everyone is probably familiar with the Maslow pyramid, right? who is at the bottom. You know, you have to take care of your physical body, of your physical needs. Then if that is taken care of, you go to the next level. You find a wife, a family, and so on, start children, a family. And then you move to the next level of consciousness until, you become an ethnocentric, have an ethnocentric view. But today, the problems that we have are at the world-centric level. So we need to join forces with people who have the same understanding, because that's where I think the transformation will come, not from those who are still struggling at the bottom of the pyramid or don't care because it's an ethnocentric issue. We need to identify these people, and this is what integral investing does. It's based on the integral model with the people who are already there now, because we don't have time. So we need to join with those who are at the same level and see how we can do the right thing. And I agree with what you just said, and this is why I mentioned transformation is feasible. If you haven't read that, please get it. It's a very small brochure. Transformation is feasible. You mentioned it as well, because in there, the scientists put together the 17 UN SDGs in context and gave us a priority. We cannot address, and I see very often impact investing gatherings, people, which one is your favorite? That's the wrong approach. And the Stockholm Resilience Center came up with the 5 action items, so it's not 17, it's only 5, still big. But this is the right direction. This is the right priority with the people who are already at the world-centric level. So that's my contribution.
So, Peter.
I think we should put the Maslow pyramid upside down. I think that is maybe the strongest thing we can do for our own behavior. Start with consciousness, feeling this big relation, and then start to see what it means for your own consumption, and so forth and so on. And maybe after that, it's even not a pyramid anymore, but a circle, where things are interrelated and not try to weigh things against each other. I think spiritual well-being is as satisfactory as physical well-being. And today people realize that more and more. About the governance question and how to organize things, I'm a strong believer in the commons. The commons is, maybe people are aware of that, that's between public and private, where you can localize ownership. We haven't talked a lot about ownership. Ownership is incredibly important, that people feel ownership from a certain project, locally, renewable energy, farming, other functions, who have a sort of half social, half commercial function, and people get more related to that again. And I feel if we make that basis stronger, people feel connected to things anymore, and that will also have a positive influence on a national level and an international level. So I'm a strong believer of commons initiatives, and they should be promoted.
So, Daniel, your final words.
Yeah. There's sitting Professor Franz Theo Gottwald. He is the chair of the Supervisory Board of the World Future Council Foundation. With the World Future Council, we have counselors, many of them among the Right Livelihood awardees, who are all over the world speaking for the local and regional cultural interests. And our topic, one of our major topics, are the regeneration of livelihoods, the strengthening of the collaboration of people on local level. And we are working with initiatives all over the world together between indigenous people, like we are sitting here together as indigenous people, and with indigenous people in other places on the world. So there's growing and coming up a new global community. And just some days ago, I was talking about a seminar I had in the year 1991 in geography, where we were talking about the term globalization, because that is a new term, and we still didn't had realized that on our planet Earth. Today, we were talking about global consciousness and global responsibility within our local and regional endeavors and activities we do. And you were mentioning something very important, and also Peter addressed that, and Mariana in other words, that we have to step out of our old linear, mechanistic ideas, monocausal argumentations, and ideas of governing and steering the world is on the small table over there is the second edition of the Potsdam Denkschrift, a small flyer, what is now a scientific commons. I wrote that together with Hans-Peter Dürr, who was a very famous physicist and also living in Munich, and here 25 years director of the Max Planck Institute for Physics and the Heisenberg Institute for Astrophysics. We are working there on complexity in the year 2004-2005, and we are at the end of the Newton's mechanistic perspective of the world. Last year, the UN decade on ecosystem restoration started. So we are facing a big paradigm shift right now, and also the taxonomy, as Peter said, is the beginning of it. The SDGs are a negotiation platform. We agree on that politically. They are not a scientific finding. They are a beginning of the discussion. And all of you are more or less discussing and sitting together here because you want to change finance. And we all know that finance is an idea, that a meaning that we as humans produced. We are not fixed in it. We are not fixed in how we interpret it. And when you were asking for a revolution, we are in the middle of a re-evolution right now. And with United Sustainability, we try to address these topics. We have many different communities and organizations around us, and you are all invited. UnitedSustainability.com, United Sustainability. If you write that together, you will find it somehow on the internet. You're invited to get in touch with us because we are searching for other collaborators, and we are searching for other partners all over the world, and also other asset managers and funding companies. And that is the last thing that I want to say. I think we all have to step out of to try to compete against each other. We have to step out of working against and trying to be the best, trying to be number one. Here, let us put our hands together, because in the next 2 decades, we don't have time to compete against each other anymore. We only have time to work and to put all our potentials together and to act, and that makes it easier. We don't have to negotiate all. And it's not everything high-tech. There are many basic things, sorry, I'm right at the end, that we need, that we know since 250 years. We need energy since 250 years. We need good water since 250 years. And we have to eradicate poverty and injustice all over the world. And that is nothing new. We know that since we are born. And we have everything that we need to know to change the world in the way we want to do it. And if we do it with the energy of Mariana and with the collaboration of you all, we will succeed.
So thank you all. For your impulse and request for change, and collaboration for me is really the key words tonight. But before the very final words, let me just do a little plug. Daniel's book, Sustainability Zero Line, if you want to read more about Daniel's thoughts, and Mariana's book called Integral Investing, if you'd like to better understand what an actual integral investor does. And a last plug from my side, the Arts and Nature Social Club is also a platform for collaboration, and it's a membership-based organization. If you're curious, let us know. And there will be a chapter in Munich at some point in the future. And again, it's really a platform to bring together the right half of the brain and the left half, and unite kind of artists or creative thinkers and more analytical thinkers. And it's all about collaboration. And I hope there will be more collaboration tonight during the networking session. Thank you again to the BMW Foundation for the collaboration with this event, and thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your night.
And thank you.
And I have 2 more books. Come on, if you really want solutions, come on, from the Club of Rome report and how to do a business angel investing. If you're interested, it's for free. Just help yourselves.
And some more comments on how we proceed. It's not on the content side, so you will have the opportunity to digest. But please stay a few more minutes on your seats. We will have some music joining. But also after the musical impressions, we will also have some food, some finger foods coming, and yeah, then we have the bar and some drinks, and hopefully still a lovely evening. So enjoy.
The hope you're not too hungry and can stay a little bit more in your seats because we have a couple of more tunes for you, and I hope you enjoy. Sky, so vast is the sky, with faraway clouds just wandering by. Where do they go? I don't know, don't know. Winds that speak to the leaves, telling stories that no one believes. Stories of love belong to you and me. Oh, Gingy, if I only had words, I would say all the beautiful things that I see when you're with me. Oh, my Gingy. Oh, Gingy, like the wind in the trees. Oh, that's how sweet you are. Near to me, without you, my Gingy. I love you more each day. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I let you go away if you take me with you. Don't you know, Gingy? Like the wind in the trees. Oh, that's how I love you, my sweetest Gingy. Happy Gingy when you're with me. You're out of sight, so one last song for you, which is one that I wrote, and it's in my native language. It's in Swiss German.
So grau und kalt, liegt schwer auf dem nassen Asphalt. In der Nacht hat der neue Morgentraum. Der auf dem Feld, es glänzt auf den Bäumen, kühle Luft, der Duft von Bäumen. Und die Menschen schlafen noch tief. Nur die von mir. Sag mir, watsch, lieb noch lies, ist noch nicht so spät. Das Lachen zieht vorbei, wird noch ein bisschen mit dir sein.
thank you, Fionn Rond. And of course, that's another important element of the artistic dimension, to actually have music and the arts. But now you're all hungry and thirsty, so thanks again and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.